I don't know about all of you, but I love this time of year. It's getting cooler now, the leaves are changing, but my favorite part is the horror. I love Halloween, and I love to be scared, and I love a good horror movie. So, to celebrate my favorite time of the year, I wanted to make the month of October all about the horror genre. When you think about the horror genre, what comes to mind? Probably Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees, Pennywise, or even Chucky. But what about the monsters of the world? I mean, there are the universal classic monsters, or Cloverfield, but I feel like Godzilla is never really mentioned in this genre, and I can see why. When people see movies like Son of Godzilla or Invasion of Astro Monster, no one is going to be scared. But then there are other movies like Gojira, GMK, Godzilla vs. Destroyer, and Shin Godzilla that I would argue are all horror movies and feature horror characteristics in these films. I also think Godzilla is at his best when he is scary, as my four favorite Godzilla movies are the four previously listed. So why isn't he considered a horror icon at this point? And I just couldn't figure it out. At the box office, Godzilla outperforms every horror icon there is, with the exception of Pennywise. So why is he not in the argument for one of the best horror icons? When I look at the horror landscape, I see inspiration from Godzilla everywhere. Godzilla in the horror genre has been blowing up lately on YouTube with indie projects like The Man in the Suit and The Invasion of Godzilla, which, if you haven't seen these projects, I suggest you check them out. With such projects coming out lately, and praise for GMK seemingly at an all-time high, I wanted to take the time to just talk about the significance of Godzilla in horror. Godzilla's most significant impact in the horror franchise is in the subgenre of monsters, as he would go on to influence movies like Cloverfield, which has been directly stated by producer J.J. Abrams to be directly inspired by Godzilla. Another film in this genre inspired by Godzilla is Pulgasari, which, if you haven't seen yet, I'm sure you've at least heard of as a fan of Godzilla. Godzilla is also featured in multiple horror films, like Friday the 13th Part 3, where you can see Debbie looking through Fangoria, a famous horror magazine, with an article about 25 years of Godzilla. Godzilla would once again appear in the Friday the 13th series in Part 5, only 2 movies later, where you can see many images of Godzilla at the camp. These images would consist of a Godzilla vs. the Thing lobby card and a promotional image for Godzilla 1954. Shockingly enough, the connections don't stop there, as in Robot Chicken, there is a skit titled Godzilla vs. Jason, where the two actually go toe-to-toe. In the film, The Blob, you can see a poster of Godzilla in 1985. And then, my personal favorite of these crossovers is from the film The Deadly Spawn, as in Charles' room, you can see many monster collectibles, and at the center of it all is the Shogun Warrior Godzilla sitting right in the middle. Godzilla would also appear in the original 2-part series It, where you can see a giant Godzilla floating in the pool. And then, in the novel adaptation of It, the creature would become a giant crow, which is said to be a mix of a crow and Rodan. The Shogun Warrior Godzilla would once again make an appearance in the movie Creepshow, along with the Rodan Shogun Warrior. Lastly, in one of my personal favorite horror movies, the original Halloween, a Marvel Godzilla comic can be seen on the couch next to the main characters. So clearly, Godzilla is very important to the horror genre. He has shown up in multiple famous horror movies, and even was the inspiration for a few. He is beloved by many horror fans, and even some of the most famous figures in horror, like John Carpenter. So, why is he still to this day considered to not be a horror villain? After thinking about it for a while, I honestly don't know. I mean, the original 1954 film is considered to be a horror film, but after that, it's kind of all over the place. I think the most likely reasoning for this is the constant changing of tone in the Godzilla franchise. Not a single era in the Godzilla series has one true tone, as each movie is different from the other. The Showa era has movies like Gojira or Godzilla vs. the Thing that I would consider to be horror films, but for every Gojira or Godzilla vs. the Thing, there are 5 Godzilla vs. Gigans or Godzilla vs. Megalons in the Showa era. This makes the Showa era very inconsistent, and almost makes it impossible to consider it a horror franchise. This, however, even occurs in the Heisei era, where I would consider Godzilla 1985 and Godzilla vs. Destroyer to be horror films, and maybe even Godzilla vs. Biollante if you squint your eyes. On the other hand, I wouldn't consider Godzilla vs. Mothra or Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 to be horror movies. So, it makes me wonder, will Godzilla ever be a true icon of horror to mainstream audiences? Even the Heisei era, the most consistent era of the franchise, can't manage to keep a tone, so how could it possibly become a horror franchise? Films like Shin Godzilla and Godzilla Minus One, I believe, are moving us in the right direction. However, the MonsterVerse seems to be taking us 2 steps back for every step forward Minus One or Shin Godzilla takes. As Godzilla becomes more and more of a hero in the eye of the larger audience, I fear the days of Godzilla being scarier behind us. Hopefully, I am wrong, but if I'm not, at least he has made an everlasting impact in the horror franchise. And lucky for each and every one of us fans that love to see a scarier version of Godzilla, we have the growing amount of Godzilla horror projects here on YouTube. So, that is all I have to say on the topic, and I hope you all enjoyed. I would love to hear all of your opinions down in the comments below. Are you a fan of the hero type Godzilla, or do you like a horror version of Godzilla? Well, after you let me know, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I hope you all enjoy, and I will see you all in the next one.